The webinar is beginning now.
Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to International Women's Day 2023, Women in Media, Navigating Your Way Through. Good afternoon. My name is Cheryl Petrosevic. I'm the co-founder and co-chair of Women in Communications and Technology Waterloo Region Chapter. Women in Communications and Technology is the only Canadian coast-to-coast nonprofit organization that inspires and supports women to achieve their highest career potential in Canada's digital economy through professional development, mentorship, advocacy, and research. This year, Women in Communications and Technology Waterloo Region Chapter, WCTWR for those in the know, is working in collaboration with over 20 local organizations representing this vibrant community to present a range of topics and discussions that celebrate the women who have made and continue to make a difference in Waterloo Region. Please join us for any and all of the 7 events running during the month of March. The International Women's Day 2023 campaign theme is Embrace Equity. Our 7 events over the month of March highlight women and organizations who have chosen to embrace equity and are working toward creating an inclusive world that empowers women and celebrates their achievements. In addition to the 2023 events, Women in Communications and Technology Waterloo Region hosts monthly mentor circles, providing free access to information and support for more than 80 women each month. We are a member-based organization and invite you to join us to help make change and highlight opportunities for advancement of women in our community. To join, go to www.wct-fct.com to join. Please join me in recognizing our land acknowledgement. Waterloo Region, including the 3 cities and 4 townships, is located on the traditional territories of the Neutral, Anishinaabe, and Haudenosaunee peoples. Waterloo Region is part of the Haldimand Tract, which encompasses 6 miles on either side of the Grand River, from the mouth near Dundalk to where it empties into Lake Erie at Port Maitland. This land is part of the One Dish, One Spoon Treaty between the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe peoples and symbolizes their agreement to share, protect our resources, and live in peace with each other. Today, this gathering place is home to many First Nations, Métis, and Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island. We recognize, honor, and respect these nations as traditional stewards of the land and water of which WCTWR is now present. As this is a remote event, we encourage you to take time to reflect on the history of the land that you are on while you attend this event. It is our responsibility to speak to the nature of being guests on a particular territory and to offer our desire for good relationships. To learn more about what land you're on, visit whos.land.com to see where you are. Events like this do not happen without the financial and in-kind support of our community. This community is over 20 people have participated in bringing this event and the other 7 events to you. Please take time to, if you recognize a face here, reach out and say thank you. That would be awesome. We also have corporate sponsors who have helped us with the financial component of this, and take time to also thank them. Apply Board, BMO, CG, Durrell Communications, Equitable Life, Grand River Hospital Foundation, Jacqueline Waddy Consulting, Kitchener Rotary, Laurier, Mortgage Ingenuity Inc., Open Text, Perimeter Institute, Profound Impact, University of Waterloo, and Vidyard. It's my pleasure to introduce the panelists to you. Luisa LaFlamme, a journalist who I saw in a recorded message last night at the Inkstained Wretches Journalism Film Festival launch. I wish you could have heard the cheers from the crowd when they saw her face. Kareem Assad, lawyer and social media commentator, has had a very busy week, being removed from multiple meet and greets, and has brought light to the importance of accessibility to political rallies in just a few short days. Luisa D'Amato, reporter and columnist from The Record, keeps us informed of local events in Waterloo Region and has been a long-term supporter of women in education. And our moderator, Melissa Durrell, CEO and Chief Strategist, Durrell Communications, entrepreneur, leader, community activist, working mom, and WCTWR volunteer. Welcome to the panel, and let's get the discussion to begin.
Let's go. All right, ladies, unmute your mics and let's get started. I want to say thanks. I've been looking forward to this for weeks, like literally counting down like it's Christmas. I also want to acknowledge everybody that's shown up to watch this panel today. Incredible panelists, and thank you for showing up to watch this. And I, of course, acknowledge it's International Women's Day. It's the actual day. So much fun. All right, we got an hour. Let's get started. So I actually want to start at the beginning a little bit here, and I'll set this up. There was a recent study done by UN Women that looked at the portrayal, participation, and representation of women in the news media over the past 20 years in 114 countries. It discovered that 24%, which is less than a quarter of the time, people were hearing or listening to or looking at women in the media. So I'm actually going to start with Lisa and Luisa. Lisa, you'll take this first. Can you take us back to the beginning of your career and tell us about your first job and what the industry looked like then? And then I'd love to hear about how you can compare it to today through your lens.
Well, I'll say, and first of all, happy International Women's Day to everyone on the panel and everyone watching. It is a day, sometimes we say on a day like this, is there a lot to celebrate given the hardships for so many women in so many places, but we have to find the moment to celebrate achievements, and there have been achievements in this industry as well. But when I started in '88, there were no, I started as a copy editor, 15 minutes every Saturday, or 15-second voiceovers for a half a day on Saturday and a half a day on Sunday. And there were no full-time female reporters. There were full-time female, this is on the television side, anchors, but no full-time female reporters. And then I was in radio 6 months. It was in the same newsroom back in the day. You know that newsroom very well, Melissa. But no full-time radio women, not one, in news, part-time. So I was on the 4 a.m. shift. Saturdays and Sundays. So it was different. It was a different world. In a weird way, it turned out to be helpful for me, because if you wanted to be a reporter, which I always wanted to be, you also had to know how to anchor. It was just one of the things they expected of you. And so I'm grateful, actually. At 24, I learned how to sort of do both. And they're both very different, actually, different skill sets. And so from an early age, I was able to learn that. I mean, it is a different world now. We actually skew more women in most newsrooms. In my opinion, I had the luxury of a fabulous female executive producer and lots of powerful, incredible women, journalists, anchors, producers, right on up. I think it's at the top level that we still are, how do I put this, falling short representation of women.
Well put. Have you ever thought about management? Because that would be the next step, right? We often see the journalists move into that. I'm just curious, has it ever been something you've been interested in?
Well, there's this old adage, which I could really go fill the hour with, but you know, good journalists do not good managers make. Right. And I live by that. So the answer is no.
Okay. Luisa, take us back to your first days in the newsroom and compare it to today.
Sure. Well, my very first job was in 1982 as a young reporter at the St. Catharines Standard. And I noticed a lot of really interesting things. One of them was that there were a few women reporters. The only editors were in the lifestyle section, of course, food, family, fashion. But the women reporters, I thought this was really interesting. None of them had children. So I thought, and then I started realizing this was part of a pattern where you fit into the male world and they would tolerate you if you fit into them. And not only, you know, whether you could stay late for drinks after work and didn't have to, you know, sort of clutter your life with an infant, but also in other ways. So later in the 1980s, I moved to the Record in '84, and it was the same thing. So you had women reporters. Now we were starting to have children, and one woman, actually her water broke while she was working on a story, and there was this big kind of sort of stain on the carpet where they kind of shampooed it out, but you could still see what had happened. I know. And when I was in labor, I was actually on the phone finishing talking to an editor about a really important story I had been working on earlier that day. So I went into labor early, and I used to tell that story proudly. And now I realize that what it was us saying, "Oh, having a kid, no big deal. Huh? What about that story?" And that was us sort of making our lives fit. And in many ways, it was also with news coverage at the very beginning, where news that was deemed important were things like, did the Ontario budget raise the price of a 24-pack of beer? Whereas the cost of daycare wasn't considered important until newspapers started seeing their business model wobble a little bit, and then they started bringing in marketing experts into the newsroom, which many journalists thought was an awful thing. But at the same time, these experts told us, you're not talking to women. Women are the ones who are making the purchasing decisions. You need to address their concerns. And that's when this sort of the news, what was considered newsworthy, changed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the reason why I brought up the management with Lisa, and I'd love to send it back to you too. There was a study, and it's basically 70% of female journalists complain that the most senior roles are remain dominated by men. This was in the UK. I don't think our numbers are much different. And so I do ask you the same thing. Has there been a pull into management, or are you lined up? Are you swimming in the same lane as Lisa there?
I do agree with Lisa. Being a good manager, I actually am a manager in a part-time job that I hold, and it's a whole different skill set. And I was offered the opportunity to move into management, but I turned it down because I think real liberation is doing what you want to do. And I wanted to be a storyteller, and I've never really deviated from that wish. There was one shining moment in about 2017 when the publisher of the record, the editor-in-chief, the managing editor, the Daily Columnist, and the police reporter were all female. And that's not true of all of the editing positions anymore. It is still true of the reporting and writing positions. But I don't really know that having a woman at the top, it changes things for that woman. I don't know if it always changes things for the people lower down in the organization. I could say that.
Yeah, it's an interesting topic. I mean, I think it's interesting to hear both of your insights on how much the newsrooms have changed, and you've also both been big part of those changes, because you see it, you believe it. I was sharing with Lisa, she didn't know she was my mentor, but she was for almost my entire journalism career, because I could see it, and that's so important. So thank you for that, just offhandedly. Karima, I want to move over to you, because you as not as a journalist storyteller, but you're a commentator in the news, and a hot person to have on the news these days. It seems you're in a lot of places. So I'm curious, it's been a few years that you've been playing this role. So what has changed as a commentator that's brought onto the newscast to talk about what's happening?
Well, for me, I guess I started off kind of based in legal expertise, and that's how I initially was reached out to, commenting on stories specific to my practice area. And when the pandemic hit, I expanded the scope of my interests, if we can put it that way. It is not an easy door to break into. So I think for anyone who is interested in taking up that role, you have to be kind of proactive and reach out and forge relationships and work to be top of mind when people need an expert to reach out to, and make it as easy as possible for the journalist on the other end. So that's something that I've worked diligently at. And now that I am on a couple of Rolodexes, I'm able to refer to other people, other colleagues, other women, and not only women, but whoever has that expertise. And always what's animating that is, who are we not hearing from? Who are the voices who are being left out of the conversation? And I think that the more that is the driving force, the better representative news will be of the general population.
It's interesting because I think I love that you talk about the hustle you have to have, right? And so I'm sure you have a few producers and editors in your email box that you're constantly. Is there a point where you don't have to do that anymore? They just contact you? Is that what's happening now? And they just know, yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of reached to that point, for which I'm very grateful and fortunate. And the other kind of, you can't have all of your eggs in one basket. So I don't restrict myself to one particular media company or channel or radio station. The news is the news, broadly speaking, and I'll talk to pretty much anyone, unless, unless there are serious concerns about the integrity of the publication, right?
Do the questions change for you? Like, as a woman, do you think you are getting different questions than a man would get in the same position? Just curious.
I don't know that that's the case.
Yeah.
I don't know. For me, like my sort of the makeup of my identity, obviously being a woman is a very big and visible part of it. But there are other facets as well. So I don't really have it at the forefront when I'm talking. I just kind of am. So I can't compare it to what questions a man may ask.
Great.
But I try to sort of stay grounded in my experiences and what's actually happening.
Yeah, great. Sorry. Yeah, that's a good point. Okay, so I just wanted to follow up with this question with, a big part of this and a lot of the communication I've been getting from people around this panel has been about online harassment. And I think that's a question I'd like to spend a little bit of time on today. So, it's obvious a day doesn't go by that we don't see online harassment. I know on Twitter, people are constantly sharing with me, the copying, pasting the different things together. So most of the time, these comments are nothing less than vile. I think we can all agree on that. And so it backs up a recent study, and I know, Luisa, you wanted to chat a little bit more about this, that claim the majority of female journalists have been the target. The majority of female journalists have been the target of online violence. And this probably is no surprise to anybody on this panel, and I'm not sure people who are listening to us right now, I think this is something you need to hear, and I'm excited to talk a little bit more about this. So let's start with just taking us a little bit behind the scenes. Share what comments you actually see as prominent women that are featured in the media. Luisa, I'll go to you first.
You want to know what people have said to me?
Yeah, if you're comfortable sharing some of the things.
Yeah, of course. Well, I probably shouldn't say some of these words in an online public forum.
Yes.
But, well, last week, I got an email from somebody who called me a hag and told me to go back to my own country because I had written a column about a gravel pit in Wilmot Township.
Wow.
So not even, hitting anybody personally. One time I wrote a column about who owns a public pathway in Victoria Park, because there's a restaurant, the Boathouse, that was thinking about building a patio that would have obstructed part of this public path. Again, a fairly nondescript topic.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time I was writing a cooking column as well.
Okay.
And somebody wrote on Facebook, she writes a cooking column, go bake a cake, bitch. Which, if I ever write my autobiography, that's going to be the title of it.
Yes.
And other times I've had death threats. I've had boycotts attempted against me, not only by sometimes by online people who are anonymous, other times by the teachers union, so very public organizations. And what's interesting is that online attacks have happened to my female colleagues, not always by men, sometimes by women as well. But I've never heard of any man having these kinds of attacks. Very specific, sort of directed towards your female characteristics. One time somebody called me a word that's a vulgar term for the female genitalia. Mm-hmm. And just because I'd written something about cycling lanes, I can't even remember what it was now, but this stuff would happen routinely, and the online harassment is real. And the survey that shows that 70% of women report being harassed online. Most of the time it is online harassment as opposed to other kinds of harassment. That is real, and I see that in my own newsroom, and it's real across the world globally, and it's real in Canada. And sometimes it affects mental health. Like when I was being bombarded by a bunch of people on Twitter, I had to take a couple of days off. I thought somebody was going to shoot me. When I got a death threat in the snail mail one time, And my mother was so worried, she wanted to send me money to take cabs everywhere so that I wouldn't be on the street. And I said, don't be ridiculous, Mom, I'll be fine, I'll be fine. But you know, it sits in your head and it sits in your heart and your sense of alertness. So I would say it's an issue probably for most female journalists I know, and certainly on a global scale. And something's got to be done about that, because you said, what was it like when you started and what is it like now? We didn't have to deal with that back in the 80s and 90s. We didn't have to deal with online harassment. It is awful.
Karima, would you share with us?
Sure. I mean, I get all manner of online harassment, and it's interesting because it doesn't come all from the same place, and it can come from unexpected angles. Luisa mentioned that, it can be women perpetrating harassment against other women. That's certainly been my experience. I've dealt with people who have very extreme and intense political views on both the left and right side of the spectrum come at me because they don't like a particular point of view. And it can be demoralizing at times. Even with this panel, I didn't announce it until 15 minutes before I was set to go live, because I've had experiences where other panelists on other matters get bombarded with hate mail because they're adjacent to me. So, that has real implications, and it's not just anonymous. It can be with real individuals, and the crossover into actual life. For me, it manifests in like physical confrontations, sometimes in complaints to the Law Society, like regulatory complaints where it's a non-client and I haven't actually done anything wrong, but it's still a letter that pops up in my inbox and I have to deal with it. So there's no real end to it. And what's interesting about online harassment, like Ontario now recognizes this as a tort. And in doing so, the judge says you can't really escape it, because you go home, you pull out your device, and then bam, it's there. You can try blocking someone, you can try muting or ignoring, but there are so many ways to get around that. So it can be overwhelming, but there's also recourse, whether that recourse is legal, so through formal channels, or in building sort of community and solidarity networks online. So that's been kind of the silver lining to this, figuring out how to tap into those support groups. But it's a very pervasive problem.
I want to just put a pin in that because I want to come back to that. But first, and thank you for sharing. Lisa, I'd love to hear from you as well. As a national reporter, I imagine, and an anchor, you probably had a lot of your DMs may have been a little scary at some time. So I'm curious if you could share with us a little bit that things that you had to deal with. Part of our
Interesting. You just said you want to put a pin in it, because I always think we are pin cushions, women in public facing jobs, no matter what they are, especially on television. It's true. I many times, you talk about recourse and what you can do about it, have had to call the police for death threats. Just the pig pen, the rat poison that comes at you. And I obviously, as I hope every woman in the communications industry, has thick skin. When I became an anchor, I had to double it. No, not exaggerating. The level, and we are in a very polarized world right now, a polarized country. It often comes down on political lines. However, it zeroes right in on your genitalia. Figure it out. It is a very disgusting, the explicit bias, implicit bias against women. For my racialized female colleagues, I see it writ large. It is devastating to me to see now what they are facing, because as bad as I think it might be for me, I would actually argue, Karima, you may agree with this, it is worse for racialized women right now. And I feel that I have this constant dilemma, you know, right up until International Women's Day today, when you get a ton of people saying, what about Men's Day? At which point I want to say, that's 364 days.
Exactly what I say.
One, gents. But you know, I wrestle with myself. Should I respond? I'm dying to respond. I write the response and then I park it somewhere, and there's people say, don't encourage them, don't humor them, just leave it out. And that is what I largely do. I am questioning that now, however, thinking maybe collectively we all do need to just call this out, even if some loser only has 5 followers. If you send it out and you've got a lot more than 5 followers, a lot more people are going to do a pile on, and the message keeps getting out. So I don't know what you all think about that. The sort of yin yang of don't give it oxygen or say what you're thinking. I wrestle with this.
I do too, actually. We were talking about this because as journalists, I mean, Karima, you're a commentator, so you often are asked for solutions, but as journalists, we're not about solutions. We're about, you know, bringing balance. Yeah. So it's not our, you know, often in our space to be thinking about this, but I was thinking about it, and I was thinking, you know, is this a place where the news organizations that we work for, or that you're a commentator on, is it part of their job to start to come in as an organization to protect its employees? I mean, I wonder about that, but I'd love to hear everybody's thoughts on what are some of these solutions, and is it, you know, really starting to shine the spotlight. And, you know, I think we have more than 200 people that are watching right now. Is this one of the things that we start to say? We build community of strong women saying this, we're done with this, because I know, yeah.
It's also men. It's also men. We can't do this alone.
Yeah.
And I think whose responsibility is it? It's all of our responsibility. And I mean, I don't have children, but I have 8 nieces and nephews who I'm happy to say all recognize and have of their ages. They really are clearly a different brain set than some of the people, even my own age, who are making comments on social media. So there is changes coming, I think, but it is about all of us collectively saying enough is enough. Naming is shaming. And I do believe the more we do this, the closer we will get to some kind of, I don't know, civility. How about we'll just go with that? Respect would be novel as well on some levels. It doesn't seem to exist anymore on social media.
I agree. Luisa.
So I think one of the worst parts about being attacked on social media is that sense of isolation that you feel. And I think it would be wonderful if there was a group of people who, in the interests of free speech and sanity, would kind of join together to pile on the people who make these awful insults and comments. That did happen once when a person called me the C word on Facebook, and a whole bunch of people said to him, you know, you could have criticized her without using that kind of language. You could have, you know, it's fine to criticize somebody, but you went way too far. This goes into misogyny. And that felt fine. And then, you know, later I got a call from a public figure saying, I saw what happened. Are you okay? And I thought, yeah, what are you talking about? I'm fine. And it was because other people came down and said, you shouldn't talk to anybody like that. That is absolutely, you know, misogynistic and beyond the pale. So that's one thing, I think. And the other thing is that it's really important to deal with this. It is a dilemma whether to respond and have them all pile on you and feel worse, or to just kind of play dead and hope it goes away soon, which it often does. But the difficulty is that so many of the people who have reported being attacked have said that they have self-censored as a response to these kinds of attacks. They're not as willing to say certain things. In addition to the problems that they find with their mental health and thinking about leaving the industry, all of which are awful, the self-censoring means it's a problem for everybody in society, and we must deal with it. And I think, you know, a support group is a great way to make that happen.
I think you've got quite a bit of experience. So I'd love to hear from you. I mean, you sort of highlighted, the legal and community sport solidarity, but I mean, because you actually do engage, you don't stay quiet, you jump on. So, like, what is, if I could are there best practices for like when you do jump into that battle? Share with us.
Sure. So, I mean, at the outset, I guess we're in a culture and a time where harassment has almost been normalized. And, I think that part of that has to do with people being terminally online, and that has just changed the way that we interact with one another. And the distance of, a keyboard or a screen really dehumanizes people. And then happening simultaneous to that is not everyone we're dealing with online is human. There are bots, there are troll farms. So separating that from the real people who are behind this or perpetrating it, that's a huge task. And I don't think that that's something, we as private citizens can do. That's where we're relying on the actual platforms. And that at this particular moment in time, right, is kind of that's a tough thing to rely on them for. But okay, so if we're talking best practices, Lisa and Luisa both talked about kind of the reverse pylon. And I think that there's something to that where, it can really shut down negativity. But as someone who's been the subject of a pylon for things that I actually, to this day, I maintain I did not do wrong. I don't really know that a counterattack in the same way is effective or sustainable long-term, especially because the way that online, it's self-regulating and there are no real standards or arbiters. So it becomes kind of touch and go. And that means mistakes can be made. And that's something to bear in mind as well. So who is the subject of this pylon? If we're talking best practices, I would agree that for the most part, I ignore. That's been kind of an evolution in progress, but I will engage where there's something so blatantly obvious that, okay, this is, we can talk about this. Maybe there's a teachable moment there. And other times it's a matter of self-defense and self-preservation. So that, you kind of have to go on instinct, and it's lessons learned as we proceed, but hard lessons, and they leave scars. So the best approach is to go in with that thick skin, realizing that, what's happening online and what drives people to behave the way they do online, it likely has nothing to do with you personally, right? And I think that's bullies in any respect. It's some sort of insecurity or unhappiness that they are projecting onto you, and you become a target, which doesn't justify it, but it helps me at least take that a little bit less personally and compartmentalize, because when you start to internalize what's being said, that's where the self-doubt and self-censoring really can be oppressive. So I don't have kind of the silver bullet answer to it, but just, if I were to sum it up on the way that we're interacting and dealing with one another as individuals, the more empathy that we can put out, even where it's not reciprocated or not really deserved, I think that's the antidote to online hate, as opposed to sort of throwing it back in their face, although that can be satisfying at times. So I'm not ruling it out. I'm just saying if we're all a little bit kinder, maybe that helps. But those are my thoughts.
I did tell a guy once who, I don't know, after a newscast had some ripe words. Fortunately, you're the one with the remote in your hand. So change the channel. It means nothing to me. But it is really interesting. The other thing I tried to do was was realizing when things really got bad, there was like a moment, and I'm going to say 2016, and politically we all know what happened in 2016. It was like the floodgates opened south of the border, and it certainly permeated the Canadian border. And I realized every morning, I'd have my phone right at my head, basically. And the first thing I would do in the morning was obviously see what's happening in the world. And you'd go to Twitter trend to see what happened in a different time zone overnight. And then, of course, you see that little red button of the mentions and you think, should I or shouldn't I? Check it. You check it and your whole day starts there. And I realized, why are you doing this to yourself in the sanctity of your own room? You're bringing this poison into your first moments of your day. So I did try to impose a rule on myself, at least have my coffee first. Somehow that gave me strength.
I love that. There's the former mayor of Waterloo. She used to say she only weighs 5 pounds. The rest of it was thick skin. I'm sure Luisa, that's Brenda Halloran. And I do feel like I think we can all kind of feel the same way when things like that happen. So I'm going to move from skin to clothing, because I do find it really, really interesting how often people feel that as journalists and as media commentators, as a lawyer, we are giving information out, yet there seems to be a gap between the information we're giving and the outer look that we have. And I'm just curious, I mean, how do you take that apart to say, I'm a senior journalist, I'm a lawyer, I'm a brilliant person and I can give out good information, but then someone says your lipstick doesn't match your blazer today. Like, how do you deal with that? I mean, do we just laugh? Is that what we do? Like, because it is kind of funny, but actually happened to me.
First, I ask my mother or my sisters, my lipstick not no, I'm just it's
right?
tough. I mean, you have to, kind of goes back to the thick skin issue, but also that has never changed. And Luisa mentioned before that we used to get it in a hard copy letter, a mail, which I sadly still have, all that, whether it was hate mail or nice mail. I don't understand it. I used to say, if I worked in a bank and I was a bank teller and you walked in to do a banking transaction, would you say to the person, what were you thinking when you put that on today? No, there's something about, again, we're not elected officials. We're just doing our jobs. And we have everybody who feels they have the right to make these comments. And I often say it's their problem, not mine. What other people think of me is none of my business. And I have to internalize that, or we would just be, under the duvet all day long, I think. It's just too important that we don't give airtime, if I can say it that way, to the negativity.
Yeah. And Karima and Luisa?
I mean, if I had a stylist, I would be into that. That would be fine. But I don't. So the way I approach it, especially because part of what I do, right, is on the ground sort of coverage of political rallies or events. So sometimes I dress a little bit ridiculous, knowing that that's going to kind of do away with the criticisms of what I'm wearing. So I may be in a wrestling t-shirt or a silly looking jacket, and there's not too much to say about that. And then it kind of brings it back on the focus of what's being said, the substance, because you're always going to get comments, but there's only so much room for it if I'm going in with that mindset. So I don't go in to look good. It's not court. Nothing is riding on my fashion sense. And I frankly don't have that much of it. So that's my take.
Well, Luisa, I'm just going to jump in here because during the pandemic, we all said, gray hair, don't care, right? We all did it. And I know, Lisa, you were a rock star for that, right? So, and I think that there's something to be said about this sort of agelessness of journalists. And it's so great when you start to, we can see actually senior journalists that are female on places. And I think that, typically when we look at some of the stations that are coming up, the station that I have right now, CTV Kitchener, there's a lot of very young people on that station. And so I do wonder, I mean, are we doing a disservice where there's so many young women that are young and then they're gone, they leave around like 35, 40, and so we're not seeing older women in those positions telling the news. Lisa, you were one of them, which was amazing. And there's still a few out there as well, but I just thought we could chat about that a little bit, how our looks need to stay the exact same all the time.
I think that's a big, huge societal question. I mean, any sector. And I also think advertisers have to come up with some new taglines that it isn't, you know, what is it, age defying cream and youthful look. It's how about, you know, embrace what we look like. We age. Why do men get to, oh, look at, they get better looking and we become hags or crones, I think, as Germaine Greer said. So it's kind of about self-acceptance for us internally as well. And then that, I hope, will reflect. But when it comes to veterans in a newsroom, I personally obviously have a bias. I think it is that balance that helps younger journalists to learn and to grow and to have someone to go and say, hey, I've got this story, what kind of angle, how would you do this, that, or the other? I think that is part of the cycle of the industry. And I think there are not enough, for sure. I mean, there are not enough women of I don't even like saying a certain age, but
Experience.
And I don't, pardon?
Experienced.
There you go. Veterans, call them veterans. Yeah. That's again something we all can keep working on, I guess. But I do try to mentor young women as much as I can, even from right now, the position I'm in, or not position I'm in, and it's the one small thing we all can do is to help younger women to try to recognize that it isn't about how we look. I mean, I think way too much importance is put on appearance, and that has to change. And it's not just individuals. As I said, this is a whole societal campaign that needs to shift.
I don't know if you can see the reactions. People are applauding like crazy in the participants. So I just want to acknowledge that, Lisa. You're getting a standing O here, which is awesome. Karima.
So I am in the process of aging. And I think I would echo what Lisa has said. And we've seen that kind of in other respects, right? Whether it's size or color, other forms of diversity, we're just slow on the uptake for this, and probably has something to do with kind of the Western, our aversion to aging and to kind of that cycle of life, right? So it's a cultural issue, and you know, that change happens by being and continuing to be, and not buying into the expectations that are arbitrarily set by advertisers.
I want to acknowledge that I've got 3 incredible women on this panel, and I'm talking about the way we look. And I just feel like I need to shout that out a little bit, because I think, you know, I guess where I want to get to is, does it take away from our jobs, actually doing your job, which is telling stories and reporting information or commentating on certain issues that are happening? I mean, is it because there is that focus, does it actually take away from the jobs that we're hired and we're experienced and educated on and can do? That's where I want to go. Less about the looks, but really, does it take away from from who we are as, you know, educated, experienced women? I think that's really where I want to go. Luisa.
Well, I've been in the newspaper business, I'm privileged to be in the newspaper business for more than 40 years. I was probably much better looking when I started, but I'm a much better journalist now than I was then. Way better. So I think people should take that sign, you know, they should look at somebody who's aging, and especially if they're in journalism, where there have been so many reasons and so many opportunities to leave, you know. So, you know, a lot of people do leave journalism for other businesses. So those who stay really, really want to be there. It's an uncertain field. it's in many ways a disrupted field. So, you know, the people who are still there, who are older, are people who love doing what they do. And I too make a point to mentor other people. I'm grateful that some of the code of journalism, certainly among women, but men too, is that to be slightly schlumpy and frumpy is part of the culture. So you don't really have to be as smart as you would if you were in some other field. So that's great. But I mean, the older person knows so much more, and our culture doesn't understand that. And if I may bring up the elephant in the room, when Lisa got turfed so unjustly and in such a, as you described it, blindsided manner, the outpouring of outrage across the country had to do with the fact that every woman over 40 knew exactly why that might have happened. And they were furious, and they made their fury felt. And that's because it's a diminishing of one's human rights to be thought less of because you're older and more experienced, when you actually probably know more, and you're being treated as if you are less. That's what I have to say about that.
I want to be respectful to Lisa, because I know that you can't, there's.
I love you for saying that, Luis. No, honestly, and I want to just play off of something you've just said there. In the Indigenous culture, which I have covered and have dear friends within, you know, these are the elders, the knowledge keepers. We look to them, we revere the knowledge they can impart on younger generations. It's the same in many parts of the world. The respect for the older woman and older man, but it seems that over history, there does seem to be this sense of invisibility. And we probably don't talk about it enough. We're talking about it now. I've been talking about it long before any of this. So I do recognize it's something we need to comment on. I will say, I was just on a project in Africa for the last month for Journalists for Human Rights, and working on women's rights and journalists in these countries. And what you're describing is, and female politicians, which is a reality here as well. Sometimes it's so ugly what women politicians face that they just say, you know what, I can't do it. But male-dominated governments and male-dominated newsrooms mean male-dominated news cycles, and that puts women's issues on the back burner. And we can't just stay quiet. It doesn't, people used to think, oh, silence will save you. It doesn't save you on any level. And I saw that up close and personal in Tunisia and Kenya and the Democratic Republic of Congo. You know, journalists who are risking their lives, literally sleeping in their newsrooms because it's too unsafe to walk home. We have come somewhere. So we can't let our side down on what we see as injustices here, because they're real. And yes, we've come a long way, but maybe it just doesn't end. I don't know, which is kind of sad.
Another fight. We got to continue to go on. And I guess, you know, we're coming close to the end here. And so one of the interesting things, and I was thinking about, was it's International Women's Day, and we celebrate it now in a way that I don't really remember doing that when I was younger. So I was curious to get all three of your opinions on, you know, International Women's Day, you know, for Lisa and Luisa, as women who've covered it, maybe for several years. Is it more in the forefront now? You know, tell me, I want to hear from both of you about what that's changed. And for Karima, I'd love to hear your experience too. I mean, imagine, you know, this is the day that you typically get the phone calls to come on and talk about International Women's Day. And has that changed? So I'll start with you, Karima, and then Lisa and Luisa.
It's funny, I don't know that I've actually ever commented on International Women's Day. Like I said, my sort of niche, it's been housing law, cannabis law, you know, the far right in Canada, the convoy. So I'm pretty focused on those, and I haven't really limited myself or been kind of pigeonholed in gender. It's something I would love to talk about, and I'm so happy to be here today. But it's not been a boon for me, if we put it that way.
Yeah, why do you think that is? That's interesting.
I don't know. I hadn't really thought about it until you raised it. As I said earlier, it's kind of like gender is part of who I am. It's inextricably linked to my personhood and persona and the way I present myself. But it's not kind of something that I flag or feature, I think. And that's despite having done some of my grad work on gender issues. So it's not a lack of knowledge on the subject, but, you know, I present on and focus on the topics that interest me and appeal to others. And while that may have a gender element to it, it's not exclusively that being my wheelhouse.
It's almost like you've led with being that, like with what your commentary is, which is exactly where I want us to get to. So that's amazing. And then over to you, Lisa.
Well, I should say that I grew up in a family of all girls. So my dear departed father would have probably said every day was Women's Day in our house. It's a lot of strong women, strong voices covering Women's Day. I don't remember it in this country, but the most vivid, and I thought about it this morning, one International Women's Day, I was in Kandahar in Afghanistan, and I thought, I want to do a story on Women's Day. The war was on, but girls were in school, and I've got permission to go into a school. We were all in a sort of, I don't know how to call it, a sort of a compound, safe place. The burqas come off, and they are just shocked that I have a passport, that I'm traveling without a male, a father, a brother. They want to be teachers, doctors, lawyers, journalists. It was the most incredible, incredible International Women's Day I've ever felt, which is aspiration. And now, today, those same women are probably, that would have been 2007, these women graduated and they were in the working world, and now they're all back, you know, in their basements, unable to leave their homes without traveling with someone. The setback with the Taliban is just so shocking to me, and I think about them on this day. We are the lucky ones here. As much as we have issues, of course we do, and I don't dismiss them. These women, the Afghan women, and the strength they show, I'm speechless really when I think about the defiance. They now know what it's like to have an iota of freedom, and they're not going to give up that fast to right now. I don't know how long it's going to take. It's a long road, but I just think that's where my enormous goodwill and support is on a day like today. And it is the one I remember the most covering.
That's great. Thank you. Luisa.
I don't think I should say anything after what Lisa said. I agree with her completely, and nobody could say it better.
Thank you. I'm going to wrap with one last question to all of you, because I had someone say, why would I want to become a journalist, a young woman, you know, after seeing some of the things that have been happening. And I still believe strongly in this, in journalism. I really do. I know all of you do as well. And so, you know, what advice would you give to young females that are thinking about going into this field? And I'll start with you, Lisa.
My advice, first of all, you don't have a choice. If you want to be a journalist, you really don't have a choice. It's kind of in the blood and in the bones, and you're so curious. What the hell else would we do with all our curiosity except ask people questions? It's something you can't stop. But my advice always is, first, my advice is, if you don't write now, start writing. Be a better writer. Be a better writer. That's what we need. There's a dearth of people who believe in the art of writing. But as far as women goes, I would say bravery. You've got to be brave, and it goes back to the thick skin line. Just be brave, stick to it, do your research, do your homework, work I know this kind of goes back to what Luisa said way back in the beginning, working harder than men though, but we still have to, we're still proving ourselves. And, but also you just know more. So when you're interviewing a politician and you've done all your research, you know when he's not, or she isn't giving you the straight goods. So there's a bonus to it as well.
Great. Luisa.
Well, I think journalism is one of the greatest things anybody can do with their lives. It's actually the foundation on which democracy rests, because you cannot have a society making decisions for itself if it isn't informed. And now that is needed more than ever, because we haven't talked about misinformation and that sort of thing, but there is such a crying need for professionalism in reporting the facts of society that we need now. And so anybody who wants to be part of that, you know, making society better to be in, I would encourage any of them, women and men, together. And I think that one great thing about journalism is that it's kind of a creative thing, in that you ask the questions, you write the story, and each story has to be written in the way it needs to be written. And that's between you and the information you take in. So in that way, it's kind of a creative art, and everybody's work is individual and different, which means a woman is not as susceptible to sexism in the workplace, because if they're good, they'll get ahead most of the time. And that isn't necessarily true for some other disciplines and sectors in the economy. So that's huge for me.
Love it. Thank you for sharing. You're thinking, I was like, no chat GPT can take our jobs, right? No AI can do that. There's that creativity that we will go to. Karima.
I guess, I mean, as someone who is navigating this space, getting comfortable with the idea of being uncomfortable, I think is very important, especially now where we do have polarization and just a lot of anger and hostility, taking up the space that you need and not allowing others to diminish you, you know, as hard as that may be, just being steadfast. That's what I try to tell myself, and that's what I would tell someone else as well.
Yeah, I love that. I love that we ended like this, because if somebody came in about 45 minutes ago and we were talking about all the, you know, the horrific things, but at the end of the day, we all love what we do, right? You're all amazing. You're brilliant women. Thank you for joining us today for this panel, for making International Women's Day something really special, I think, for everybody who's watching and all the people that'll get to see the rebroadcast. I really loved what you said about, you know, how we need to protect our journalists. And I'm not to say female journalists, we need to protect our journalists, our Canadian journalists and those abroad. And so for the 100 and some people that are watching right now, I think this is something that we can do. And thank you for giving us these great ideas and for your time today. So grateful.
Yes. I want to say something to you, Melissa, because look at you have evolved into your own fabulous business. You are a role model, and it's been really a great conversation. And I want to thank you for giving us your time, and also Cheryl and the whole team. It's been really kind of nice to hang out with you ladies. Next time with wine.
Yes. Thank you, Lisa. I'll hand it back to you, Cheryl. I know we've got 2 minutes here.
Awesome. Oh my God, what a discussion. And I don't know if you guys were able to see as Melissa mentioned, the floating hearts and the accolades that are flowing through the conversations. It's just been phenomenal. So thank you, thank you, Melissa, Lisa, Karima, Luisa. This discussion has left and inspired so many people, and I know it's going to continue to inspire people as they watch this. I heard that there's a viewing party tonight that people are looking at, bringing a group of women together to be able to watch this. It's going to be rebroadcast, as Melissa had indicated, on Rogers TV. So the reach is going to continue. So thank you so very, very much. It's been a complete and utter honor. I want to thank our steering committee as well, because without the time and energy and effort that they all put into bringing this together, this event wouldn't have happened, nor would the other 7 events that we have going on been able to be part of this whole entire International Women's Day month. Waterloo Region, we don't want to do just one day, got to do the whole month. So keep building it out. And Lisa, I liked what you had said about being growing up in a family of women. I grew up with 6 brothers and a sister.
Wow.
So my sister and I like to think that we helped our brothers become very good, strong allies and supporters. So it was just, the job that we had to do. But so thank you all very much. On another note, I'm just going to share my screen just so that we can wrap up with just a little note. We had this year within our group, one of our members' daughters took her own life in October. And as part of a way to be able to recognize and support her and support those with mental health, we have partnered with the Waterloo Region Community Foundation to start a fund to raise money for the Arts Fund. So if you feel so inclined, the information is on the screen, or you can go to the Waterloo Region Community Foundation. That's right. Thank you very much. There is the QR code there too. So please just go direct and donate. Jackie was an amazing young woman. She was part of our Mentor Circles program, and her mother was the co-chair of Waterloo Region. So thank you to Jackie for being able to shine a light on mental health for us. The other thing is that we want to talk about was the upcoming events. So we have a youth program that we're running, Women in Business, on March 21st, March 22nd, Defending Women's Rights, March 28th, another youth program on nonprofit organizations. And we wrap it up on March 29th with an in-person event, Women in Politics, Representation and Its Challenges. So there's some really great discussions still coming down the pipe. Again, I invite you to register online with each and every one of those. And as we mentioned before, events don't happen if sponsors can't come to the table and help. And we're very, very honored to have this great select group of organizations here sponsoring our event. Thank everyone again for coming and for participating. And I wish you all a great day and great inspiration that you've taken from this conversation, and move forward and have a great day. Melissa, did you have something else to say?
No, I'm good. Thank you, everyone. Happy International Women's Day.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye, everyone.